Welcome to Talking Schmitz. I'm your host, Nate Schmitz. The goal of this show is to help you improve both mentally and physically. Enjoy the show.
Today we want to discuss the art of healthy relationships. What does that even mean?
That does seem quite artistic, like many things. But we can go deep down the rabbit hole and go, what do you define as art? And what do you define as healthy? And what do you define as a relationship?
Let's not do that.
Yeah, I'd rather not as well.
But just being able to have good relationships with ourselves, with the people around us, and romantically is really a big part in having an overall healthy life.
Yeah, I don't think many people would disagree with you on that one. And so, yeah, we'll stick with that as the base premise of having healthy social relationships, business ones, romantic ones, as well as the one I feel is kind of the key component to all of it is the healthy relationship with yourself. But I'm a little biased towards that because
You love yourself.
I didn't used to. And so it was really the missing link for me to start progressing and to continue to, as opposed to some people are very much shut-ins, and having healthy social relationships will be quite good for them and honestly probably be the missing link for them. That being said, I'm still going to stick to my guns and say that having a healthy relationship with yourself is the foundation for all of your other healthy relationships.
So circling back, what do you mean by you used to not have a healthy relationship with yourself?
I used to be fat, used to smoke cigarettes, I used to overly indulge in alcohol. I pretty much treat my mind and my body like crap and was wondering my life was not so good.
What do you think was the driving force that pushed you towards those substances and alcohol and cigarettes and all of that?
If I were to be honest, it was a form of escape. I was utilizing it to escape from having to face my feelings and emotions that I didn't want to face from what people would classify as different traumas and events in life.
I think that would resonate with a lot of people because we all have our issues and we all find our ways to escape and avoid those things. And for some people, it's drugs and alcohol. Others, it could be even pornography, video games, anything like that.
Yeah, video games resonates pretty deeply as well. I'll always be a gamer, so to speak, but man, yeah, I definitely spent a little too much time.
How much is a little?
Not that it wasn't fun, but used to do raids on different video games, and if you know anything about that, they're hours straight of video games with other individuals who are probably in similar situations for whatever reasons they are. Great for, you could say, business coordination and setting up meetings, so there's positives.
You can make some friends.
There's positive, and yeah, you make online friends, but yeah, getting online and
You make some relationships.
playing, for 8+ hours and really not getting some of the things done that would be better to get done, I would argue, which pile up when you spend too much time playing those games.
And you mentioned that when we don't have a healthy relationship with ourselves, that oftentimes we fall into these escapes and avoidance behaviors. How can we look at ourselves, just because it's hard to look at ourselves? Maybe not for you, because you're a good-looking man, but
Thank you.
when we look at ourselves...
I get stuck next to mirrors for like 5 minutes at a time. It's just so difficult.
Yeah, you replace the video games with
mirrors.
reflections. But how can we look at ourselves and determine, do I have a healthy relationship with myself?
On a base level, it's just assessing whether or not you have a lot of the things you've previously desired. Is generally a good litmus test. So if, say, you wanted a boyfriend or girlfriend and you have one, that is a good sign. If it's an unhealthy relationship, not a good sign. If you always wanted, say, career success and you have it, you probably do have somewhat of a healthy relationship with yourself because you can accurately assess things to progress through your career. If you're not actually happy at that job or with some of your coworkers, perhaps not a healthy relationship with yourself. It's more assessing whether or not, previous desires are actually fulfilled in a more holistic fashion rather than just, I want to make $1 million. I made $1 million. I have a healthy relationship with myself. It's like, well, do you? Or is your body physically healthy? Are you essentially suffering from some level of anxiety or depression? And are you doing things to not have to face life? Would be one of those ones.
And oftentimes when we don't have that healthy relationship, reaching those previous desires and achieving those goals becomes so much harder, and we might find ourselves getting in our own way more often than not.
Yeah, we're usually the problem and solution.
But we are the solution.
Yes.
So if we look in the mirror and we decide we want to work on a relationship with ourselves just because it's something that we can always improve on, how would we go about doing that?
The simplest one would be practicing radical honesty. And so being willing to, say, look in the mirror and be vulnerable. Say you do have $1 million in a Ferrari. Are you happy with that?
Of course you are.
Yeah.
$1 million in a Ferrari, I'll take that.
Yeah. Well, there's quite a few people who aren't because they were sold into an idea that that's what gives them fulfillment and happiness. And then a lot of times the worst thing for a lot of people at the start is to get everything you wanted, because then you realize, crap, I never wanted this. Other people wanted it for me. And then it's a harsh awakening to you didn't actually get to know yourself. But if you're willing to sit down, generally a good one is making a list, essentially creating almost a tournament system, if you will, making things on that list compete against each other.
I'm listening.
Yes.
You got me a tournament system.
Yep. And you sit down and go, hey, you put the Ferrari versus the $1 million, or the girlfriend or boyfriend versus the family life, the traveling versus the farm. They'll randomly start to compete against each other, but as you narrow them down, you'll actually get to know what things you inherently value more than others. And then from there, you get to assess, do you truly value those things and why you do, which is that's the next scary step. But once you have a general list of, say, 10 things that it boils down to that you really enjoy or that your highest values, like I want to travel and I want to have a family and I want to have, a dog and a business, or if those are just some of the things, you get to assess why, and then you have a more well-centered why, and then you can have more oomph behind taking care of yourself and the relationship you have with yourself. But the oversimplified takeaway is, just like any relationship, for it to be truly beneficial and fulfilling, you have to be willing to get to know. So if it's a relationship with yourself, you have to be willing to get to know yourself.
And one of the great tools that we have is that we can sit down and, is there a special name for that kind of list?
You can name it whatever you want. I'm just biased towards the tournament system because of my joy in the tournament systems in not only sports I used to play, but in anime. Those tournaments are always epic for almost any anime, where it's like a school versus a school, or a different planet versus a different planet. However you want it, it's just epic to see each thing be like progressively a cooler fight.
Yeah, I have fun with it. The tournament arc is such a staple because it's nonstop action. And we can create these for our own values and goals. And it might take a little bit of willpower and patience to actually sit down, pen and paper it, or do it on a computer or something like that. There's a lot of value in actually writing down goals and things you value or how you want to see your life and actually putting it in front of you. If you end up doing things that are completely in the opposite direction towards the things that you decide is most valuable to you or goes against your why, then you know that might not be the most ideal thing to do.
Yep. Or you may discover that you really didn't enjoy, say, that why. You just thought you should. And then in trying out some of the things and heading that direction, you run into a boundary and go, I guess I didn't want to head that way. Mm-hmm. And then inevitably you still get to know yourself better. And then that pays huge dividends in external relationships. Because on a base level, if you're not even willing to get to know yourself, well, why should anybody else want to?
That's very well put. Listing it out is a good exercise in getting to know yourself. It's the closest way that we can come to going on a date with ourselves. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe second closest. But kind of listing that out, we're able to look at those things and pit them against each other to see what's most important. Then we can get closer to understanding the overall life mission, which is our why. Why do we need a why?
It just gives your life, or tends to give your life, a lot more oomph and luster. So when we're curious as to how people do a lot of things, generally it's because they found a strong enough why. Like, how did this particular person shoot 10,000 shots and become so good at basketball, hockey, whatever? Because they had a why. Similarly, a lot of successful business people, like, how did they push through all this pain or all the rejection? Because they had a why. How did that celebrity reach their status? Because everyone was telling them, oh, you'll never be a great actor or action star or whatever. And it's like because they had a why. And then on that first date analogy, that's a great way to actually come up with a lot of the questions to ask yourself as well. Like if you put yourself in a date scenario where you're trying to say find a good partner, what questions would you ask them to get to know them, to see if they're a good match? Those are your questions to ask yourself as to what your own, say, interests are, or what do you do for a living type stuff. But you'll actually get the deeper questions that you actually want to have to get to know someone on a deeper level and their values, as opposed to,
What's your favorite color?
yeah. I mean, it's cool to find anything you can relate with people on, but if you're doing a lot of that surface level stuff, don't be surprised when all you have is a surface level relationship and then get upset that it blows up in your face later. I had no idea they hated baby seals. It's like, did you even ask? Well, no, we both like the color green, though. Like, all right, good for you.
She said she liked video games. I thought she was the one.
Yeah, that's a rough one.
Yeah, really be able to answer those deeper questions and really giving it some thought and not just saying what sounds good, because having a good why can be very powerful.
Good why. Once you do get to know yourself, you're generally going to hold on to healthier relationship boundaries, and you'll be able to see through a lot of the artificial and push through the struggles that you'll inevitably have in any of the relationships you have, be it with yourself, business partner, romantic partner, because you generally came to an agreement on why you both want to be in the relationship. And then that's your lighthouse or guide, if you will, when you go through whatever fight you go through over paper towels or video games or someone's drinking problem, like whatever it may be. If you're both have done at least some of the self-work, you'll come to the relationship with similar whys, and then you'll be able to push through a lot of the stuff to have generally a more successful long-term relationship and something to hold on to, as opposed to, wow, they looked at me wrong today. Good for you. And why are you even in a relationship if a look can end it?
Yeah, so whys are not only for us as individuals, but there can be a why for every relationship that we have to an extent.
Oh, yeah. And even on a business level, having a corporate why keeps everybody on the same page, and you end up having a more productive, contributive business.
And Nate, you also have your own why, correct?
Yeah.
How long did it take for you to come up with your why?
I personally reassess it every 2 to 3 years. But it took, thanks to the help of others, because that's where you reach out. Thank you, Simon Sinek, in his book of Find Your Why. I use that technique, and I meet up with someone who seems to, will go have a good vibe and be interested in their own growth, but someone I don't know that well. And then I have what's called a why session with them. And it generally takes anywhere from as little as 3 hours, upwards of 6+, them getting to know you and you sharing everything. And then they end up becoming a really good friend generally. And then they give you their insight. It's a more unobstructed view as to your base drivers in life. And it's very, very helpful.
And that's why we're here today. If you want a why session with Nate, for 3 easy payments of $1,000.
Yes. I mean, $999.99.
$999.99. Ooh, that sounds good. But yeah, do we keep our why secret, or are you able to share your why?
I would argue it's better to share your why. When you do your own deep dive, you're getting to know your quote-unquote true self, at least at that stage in life. And so when you get to share your why with people, they get to see almost instantly whether or not they're a good match, because not everybody's going to have the same why. Some people's whys are more selfish because that's where they're at in their life. Some people's whys are more altruistic because that's where they're at. But if you're out there going, hey, this is my why, and you wear it proudly, people who have that same why will kind of naturally gravitate towards you, and then you end up building good friendships and networks and relationships because you're actually building it off of the truth rather than, oh, this is how I want to be perceived.
So can you share your why with the listeners?
Yes. So the current one is to continue to break limits so that I may inspire others.
Beautifully put. So having that why, can you give an example of how having that has pushed you towards one direction or another as far as decision making in your life?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Say what I do just with picking out who I work with as a coach. People will come to me, and everybody wants to improve, which is, well, generally everybody that comes to me wants to improve, at least.
I want to stay the same.
Yeah, outwardly.
I want to get worse.
But there's a lot of subtle word clues that people will use when I go through the initial consultation with them, where they're more in what's considered like a fixed mindset. So they're communicating that they don't actually want to break the limits they've imposed on themselves, I'll easily be able to go, I'm not the right fit for you, and someone of this type of coaching or whatever capacity will be a better fit. And so it helps me make better decisions on who I personally work with, because there's people who, whether or not they're aware of their mindset, just like I'm not aware of that breaking limits thing, I'm aware of theirs, and I can go, oh, they're not ready yet, rather than me trying to help everybody needlessly, which I started off doing. I can help everyone. That is 100% not true. Being able to narrow down who I can actually be more effective with is hugely impactful on their success rate, my success rate, and both of our fulfillment in our professional interaction. And a lot of them end up becoming great friends because of it.
Definitely having that positive relationship with ourself and starting with ourself is crucial. I mean, we're the most important people.
Oh yeah, and it's not in a narcissistic manner. Like, if you die, then there's nothing you can do to affect the world in any ways you want to. If you want to be the next great evil villain in the world, you can't do that if you're dead. If you want to be the next great hero, still can't do that if you're dead.
Can't do that if you're dead. Can't do that to its fullest potential if you don't have a good relationship with yourself. Probably can't be the best father to your kids or mother if you don't have a strong relationship with yourself.
And you'll actually generally have a lack of sense of direction because you don't know who you are and what you want. And that's where most people feel lost in life. Because like, what should I do? What do you want to do? I don't know. Well, then get to know yourself better.
Once we're in a good place, how does that go into having healthy relationships with other people?
Well, as I alluded to with the why, you get to find better, not only similar, like-minded individuals for certain, say, life goals, but you can also find better adversaries. Depending on how you look at it, there's kind of we'll go the hint to the anime, one of the greatest adversarial relationships ever is, Goku and Vegeta. And so they both continuously push people or each other to improve, even though they're, we'll go frenemies, if you will. And the better you know yourself, the better frenemies you can pick to continue to improve in the ways you desire to improve, rather than it being forced upon you, which is where a lot of people get upset with the world. Is, why would the world essentially, or God or whatever, do this to me? It's, you have way more control over who is your worst critic, so to speak. And you also get to control who your best cheerleaders are. And so life becomes a lot more fulfilling. You feel like you're more in the driver's seat, whether or not you are.
I don't think a lot about trying to find adversaries in my life. I usually thought adversaries would be just a negative energy that's imposed on my life. But you're saying that we can seek out these sorts of relationships to enrich our lives?
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that's great about getting to know yourself. Because no matter what, you're going to find people who don't mesh well, or they conflict with whatever your belief system is. And that's just a reality of the world. And as soon as you can embrace it, it becomes something you can use for your own growth, rather than having to crush your enemy. Your enemy actually makes you more powerful.
Can you give examples as to how these kinds of relationships have enriched your own life, and then how we can go about finding that for ourselves?
Well, we'll use one that's probably more relative to, that people can relate to, is internet trolls. They're not necessarily, you don't go seeking them out, but you do.
Some people do.
Some people do.
Lots of people can't help themselves. I know I can't.
But you're just by being on the internet, you have to admit you're seeking them out. One, especially having a social presence. But if all you ever had was cheerleaders who were just, you're the greatest, you're so sexy, smart, whatever things you want, you're so rich, you're so buff, you're whatever.
That sounds great.
Oh, that sounds phenomenal.
I'd rather have that.
But that being said, that's kind of like fertilizer, if you will, for growth. But you're really not going to grow that much. If you overwater a plant, it dies. And so we need some resistance, if you will. And some of your internet trolls, while some are just doing it to be trolls, some people are actively criticizing your tweet, video, whatever, your project, in a manner that helps you improve it. And that's what you've been seeking the whole time, is to be a better you. And so they're hugely impactful on your growth, because they're willing to be, they're technically being more honest with you, in that, hey, you looked fat from that angle, or, oh, the way you worded that was very hard to understand. And you're like, oh. And a lot of them you can reach out to and go, hey, what would be a better way to word that? Or what would be a better angle? And you're like, oh crap, they were correct. That is a better angle. And so having adversaries and actively, say, seeking them out, so to speak, helps you grow way more quickly than just rejecting a lot of the criticisms out of hand.
Right. And you definitely need to have a good relationship with yourself and a healthy sense of self and self-esteem before you can have these relationships kind of tearing you down a bit or giving you the business.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's a great feedback as to just how healthy of a relationship you have for yourself, too, in terms of when you asked earlier. If you're overly sensitive to criticism, you generally don't have a good relationship with yourself. And people don't like to hear that, i.e. proof they don't have a good relationship with themselves because they lack self-awareness. Because if someone goes, oh my gosh, you got giant ears, and this is the Tom Bilyeu one, he's like, well, yeah, you're right, I do. And it's like, oh, so you can sift out the people who are just trolling to troll and then see the people who are, quote unquote, who you previously would have seen as trolling, but they're actually giving you positive, critical feedback.
Absolutely. Definitely before I started my fitness journey, I mean, boy, was I sensitive to criticism.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't like it. I just tried to avoid it with pizza and video games. But I remember, you coming along, giving me some criticism that hurt a little bit. Okay, I'll be honest, it hurt a lot. But kind of got to look at myself in the mirror and relax a bit. Then that's when the growth started to happen.
Thank you. That one is, you don't necessarily always want to seek out adversaries. You do want friends as well. But some of your best friends will be people who are previously adversaries. And just because they actually gave you a more honest set of feedback about who you were. And so they helped you get to know yourselves better. And so you're grateful for them for that. And then you tend to trust them to be that role a lot more in future circumstances.
Yeah, and I would argue those sorts of relationships can carry more value than the cheerleader relationships as far as achieving goals and self-growth.
Oh, yeah.
I love my cheerleader friends too.
Oh, yeah. No, we need both. It's never one or the other. It's sometimes you're quite down, you're exhausted, you're drained, you've already put everything you had into it. And it's that epic scene from sports movies where they do the slow chant to like get them back up on their feet. Or one of my soft spots in anime, it's that flashback scene of the teacher going, just one more time. And they're like, "Wah," and they come up and scream like, yeah.
So good.
And so you feel empowered. And so when you're seemingly at your breaking point, cheerleaders are fantastic. But then when you're at your strongest, you don't want to be the overly cocky villain who's like, your powers aren't strong enough for me. And then they get the floor wiped with them because they had no idea just how much weaker they were than their adversary. And so when you have a good adversary going, hey, you thought about this weak spot? It's like, oh, I didn't even know I had that one. It's, oh, okay. And then you actually do have more reason to be confident in stepping into the next battle, if you will.
And that's why we're here today. If you're looking for a strong adversary, Nate Schmitz.
Yeah, we will crush you.
Available to make fun of you.
For the low, low price. So a little pricier than my, Y session, the $99,999.99.
As far as relationships, we talk about the relationship to self, the acquaintances and the friends that we keep. How about relationships with our romantic partners or people we might be interested in? How can we look at our romantic relationships and determine, are they healthy, and how can I make them healthier?
You can always improve them, so don't necessarily get too stuck on that one. But knowing yourself, you'll be able to be authentically yourself and be able to gauge the feedback you get from, say, the person you're on a date with or currently courting or any of those things. If they are in any way not meshing with your more centered self and a lot of those values, you can instantly move on to the next person rather than being stuck in potentialities because you're no longer sold on someone's, say, potential per se, because anyone can potentially be anything. But if they're not at a base level having certain foundational values that match your center of self, it's a lot easier. You can more confidently go, hey, you're a great person. We are not great together. This will not be a good match. You'll inevitably be setting a healthier and healthier foundation for each future attempt.
In your opinion, what is a good timeline when you start dating someone, how long it would take to find out if you have those foundational core values aligned with each other?
Start off with a longer timeline, and as you become more self-aware and establish a better relationship with yourself, that timeline gets really, really short. It's amazing how quickly you can sift through a lot of the mismatches out there, not to be mean, because I don't want to say sift through the crap out there.
How hurtful.
I know. And like a first date.
I just picture you,
You can write
halfway
someone off.
halfway through the appetizer, you're like, this isn't going to work.
Oh, easy. That's like super short. Like as a guy, there's girls who will literally lie out their butts to just try and get the second date. And you're like, well, they're not being authentic. No second date. And even if they're just like, oh my gosh, no, I totally like anime and all this stuff too. And I love working out. And I love this. And I love this. And you can look at them. And you're just like, no, you don't. Like, I get that you're trying to impress me and I'm flattered, but no thanks. And so, yeah, the time frame for success or a successful relationship and assessing it gets shorter and shorter.
As you get better at it.
Yes.
And you understand yourself better.
Yeah, so always be assessing and getting to know yourself, and then know that part of that process is, say, going out on dates with people as well. Because you'll see, oh crap, I was being kind of phony on this date. I really didn't like that. And so you do still have to be socially interactive to understand that who you are in a dating circumstance, in a longer term relationship circumstance. And that's why I say give it a little more time, because while you're getting to know yourself, you're also getting to know the other person. But on a base level, it shouldn't take any more than 3 months, say once you're in your, we'll go 20s, to see whether or not your values align. And so understand why you're dating, because if you're just dating to hook up with people, don't even worry about the value alignment, honestly. Just have fun and know that there's going to be some learning and repercussions for that. But if your goal is to have a healthy long-term relationship, you want to figure things out as quickly as possible. So on that first date, you're going to easily guide through into senses of value as opposed to the very shallow conversations. So you're going to be willing to have those conversations of like, essentially almost like an interview, like, hey, what's one of your proudest moments you've ever had in life? It could be a question you ask someone. If they say that time they won a beauty pageant and it's just because they wanted to feel pretty, but if it's that time they won a beauty pageant and because they were an ugly duckling and they had all these adversities and things, typically they have a more tenacious value type mindset, which means they'll be able to like push through in the hard times. So depending on their responses, you be willing to have those.
You might like the first response better. You might like the second response better. Dealer's choice there.
Oh, yeah.
You can always find any of these deep questions, even just for fun, quick Google search too, and just kind of find those things out. And you can even ask yourself those questions and learn more about yourself.
Yep. Yeah, that one, just make sure you're getting deeper. And if you're not even willing to go deep, you're not ready for a long-term relationship yet.
But did want to talk about a little bit about boundaries and having healthy boundaries in relationships, because we talked off mic about how to maintain a healthy relationship, oftentimes there is conflict and butting of heads, and that having boundaries can help this. But what does that even mean to have healthy boundaries?
I would argue healthy boundaries are ones that can simultaneously let things through as well as keep things out. And learning how to do that with, say, getting to know yourself and healthy boundaries is part of the process of why like people will always recommend relationships come with compromise. But that gets taken too far, and then you compromise who you are as a person, and that leads to an unhealthy relationship. And that's why you need the other healthy boundary that keeps things, say, as they are. And that's why as you get to know yourself, say you are, one of the things on that tournament style list is traveling the world. If the other person doesn't have a capacity to understand that you are a traveler, and then you'll always want to say a home to come back to, but that you're a traveler, it's up to you to decide whether or not to compromise. But if one of your base values is travel, I would argue it's something to hold steadfast on as opposed to compromising on. So you'll find someone who would want to not only let you travel, but to a degree be willing to travel with you. And then that's something you don't have to, say, compromise on, and your boundary kept. Whereas something as superficial as money, not that it's not important, but like, oh, someone has to have a $100,000 salary. That's a boundary you can easily compromise on, i.e. they make $50,000, I make $50,000. In aggregate, we make $100,000 a year. And it's a lot easier to attain. So things that are more inherently you that you never want to give up, so to speak, not that you won't have to in certain regards, i.e. if you have kids, you may not be able to travel nearly as much as you do without them. But the bigger life factors are going to be much more pertinent to assess your boundaries on.
Having your own boundaries, which comes from also having a good relationship with yourself, your boundaries can be inspired from that. So how do you decide when is a good time in my relationship to hold steadfast to my boundaries versus like when I compromise?
Well, that's where the relationship why comes into play, as well as how well you know yourself. The more you've been your authentic self in the relationship, the less likely you're going to have as many trespasses on your boundaries, because someone's going to essentially like you or love you for you. We'll go say you're the traveler. If someone's just pretty or handsome or charming, and then you're like, well, I like my time with them better than I like traveling. It's, do you actually like that? Or is this just, say, the quote-unquote honeymoon stage and things like that? Or you're overvaluing the other person to a degree. Not that people don't deserve to be valued, but they deserve to be valued genuinely. If you're just doing that because you enjoy their company temporarily, then look at your healthy boundaries and say, hey, this is a boundary of mine. I'd rather travel than spend time with you. It goes back to getting to know yourself, and that's why the list is so important. You got to face those things, and then you're going to experience some of those boundary pushes whilst in the relationship, because there's going to be things that come up like, oh, I had no idea someone was going to say approach me that way, or it's kind of back to the adversarial thing. Sometimes they're going to be a bit of an adversary and be like, well, why do you want to travel so much?
Mm-hmm.
And
not a bad question to ask.
yeah. And when they do ask, you may get to know yourself better in that, well, I don't like feeling limited. And not traveling makes me feel small and limited. And then you can go to the root problems or issues as to in what way are you feeling limited? And, oh, this way, or what way are you self-limiting? And then, oh, okay. And you may resolve that issue and go, hey, you know what? The urge to travel isn't there anymore. Or you may go, ooh, now it's reinvigorated and now I want to take you everywhere with me.
Right. And a healthy relationship, there in that example, can be challenging at times, and there's room for compromise, but overall, a nurturing relationship is one that will support your growth and that you would support each other's growth, which will then also determine the amount of time you spend with each other.
The easy assessment in a relationship as to whether or not a boundary is healthy for either party is whether or not you can actively discuss it. In general, if there's a lot more cutoffs and my way or the highway type mentality, which in certain regards can be useful. But in general, if you're just never willing to have a discussion as to why you have your boundaries and you just go, this is my boundary and you got to respect it, not a healthy boundary. It's still sensitive. But if you found a partner that you can actually discuss your boundaries with, then it's arguably a healthier boundary. Because, hey, I need to travel, or I need to make $1 million, or I need to, have kids, or any of those things. If they're willing to discuss that with you and not in a shouting match, then you're generally hitting on a healthy boundary and a healthy partnership, because you can, oh, hey, I never thought about it that way. Not, no, you need to respect my need to go party with my friends. Like, why? Because I need to party.
Like, yeah, if you don't understand that, then you're a bitch.
Yeah. Or you're a
Nate
douche.
told me to have boundaries and to keep them.
Yeah, and it's good to keep them, but yeah. If you have to lay down the law every time, so to speak, man or woman, with your boundaries, and you have no real legitimate reason for that, that's not a healthy boundary. And you can't blame it on anybody but yourself. You just chose an outside story, like, I don't know, the feminist movement or the red pill movement or whatever it is. Like, oh, they said I needed to do this. Like, do you? Or is that just an idea that sounded good to get what you wanted out of a relationship?
Oh, goodness. And we hope everyone listening can have healthy and lasting relationships and stronger relationships with everyone in their life.
Well, I would argue just to have a healthy one. The duration of a relationship doesn't denote the health of it.
Okay. It just sounded nice.
Oh, yeah. Some of the people's best relationships were, very short because they were authentically themselves for 3 months, 3 years, whatever. And then in encouraging each other's growth, they grew apart. And it's like, hey, we got to move our own separate ways. And, oh, okay. And that was 100% healthy.
No, that's a good point, in that the length of a relationship does not determine the strength and quality of one. Mm-hmm. Just like when everyone knows, like, oh, that couple, they must be the best couple ever. They've been together for like 10 years. How do you know that? How do you know?
Oh, yeah. Given enough exposure, we can get used to damn near anything. And so getting used to something doesn't necessarily mean you're growing or healthy, because people can get used to being fat. People can get used to being whatever disease. People can get used to being broke. It doesn't mean it's healthy or happy. You have to be willing to grow. That's a tougher find to generate.
And sometimes goals is like, what are you looking for in a relationship? And I've heard this before. They said, I'm looking for a relationship that lasts for at least a year. And I'm like, a timeline doesn't seem like the best goal for what you're looking for in a relationship.
Yeah, sign up for a year subscription on something.
On this dude.
And you just lasted a year. Boom. Success.
Yeah, there you go. You lasted a year.
Yeah, was it good?
Yeah, but what happened in that year, I think, is a better question to ask.
Oh, yeah. Well, and those are some of the giveaways when you're, say, on a date that someone hasn't thought anything through and they're not a good match if you're looking for something deeper. Like, if you're not, you can just have a sex friend for a year, essentially. Like, I'm looking for a relationship that lasts a year. Are we going to have consistent sex? If yes, I think I can manage for a year. Like,
sure, there you go. Yeah, your 1 year sex anniversary.
Yeah, we made it 1 year. All right, peace.
So, to summarize, when it comes to the art of healthy relationships in this volume, it starts with the healthy relationship with self. We can start with an exercise where we actually list down our values and learn about ourselves, seeking worthy adversaries and cheerleaders, and finding your why, both for yourself and in your relationships, and setting healthy boundaries.
Yep, well put.
So, thank you everyone for listening. This has been a real joy, Nate.
It has. That was a good one. I could keep going on that one for way too long.
We know.
But thank you for listening, everyone.
This has been Talking Schmitz.
Yep. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Talking Schmitz. Remember to subscribe, leave us a review, and share us with your friends. Your support helps us reach more people and continue bringing you quality content. You can find us on Instagram at talking_Schmitz, and we'll catch you next time.